Welcome to Empowering the Next Generation podcast. I am Helen Veru. This podcast is dedicated to help anyone connected to preteens and teens to give them tools, empower and inspire teachers, high school senior leaders, and parents to build the future leaders of tomorrow. We discuss about controversial and relevant topics related to the world of education, the main problems you are facing, and solutions to help you navigate your journey. We want to make a positive change in education by bringing on experts that will give you a different perspective on how you can solve the hardship you are facing today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Empowering the Next Generation podcast. Today, we have an amazing guest speaker. Her name is Jackie.c.scully. She's an accomplished history and psychology teacher recognized for her dedication to education. As a creator and host of The Teacher Story, she skillfully shares her personal journey and conducts insightful interviews with fellow educators. Her vision is clear: to amplify the voices of teachers and education professionals, positioning them as catalysts for meaningful reform within the educational landscape. Beyond her podcast, Jackie is also the co-founder of the Teacher Circle, a thriving LinkedIn group that fosters a global community dedicated to supporting educators and all stakeholders in the field of education. This is Jackie's mission. She wants to shift the educational system alongside with stakeholders from all backgrounds to focus on nurturing the whole human. The factory style system no longer works and probably never really worked. And now it is a time to truly create a holistic education system. I am so excited about Jackie today. So welcome, Jackie, here with us in the Empowering Generation podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Helen. And that's such a beautiful introduction. I am just excited to be here and share our passion for education and what we can see in the future. So thank you so much.
Yeah, this is something that I always loved, is to see people like you to really shift education, to leave their mark, in the educational system. Okay, so Jackie, how did you really start in the world of education? Just share with the audience.
Yeah, it really started when I was a child. My dad kind of inspired me. He would share these stories, history stories about world geography. That was his passion. He was not a teacher, he was a social worker, but worked with kids, but always had a passion for the social sciences. So we always talked at length in long car rides. And then I was a camp counselor. I played teacher in my basement before I had
Wow.
a sibling. So it was just always around me. And when I went to college, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I actually shifted from elementary education to social studies because that love for
Mm-hmm.
history and geography. So I guess it's just always been with me. And then it's been fostered by my parents and the community service I've done, since I was young. And yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. So
Wow.
I definitely think it's in my DNA.
Yes. And as we shared before, you have actually grown into your role as an educator, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, because you created the guided teacher community, a book, the guided teacher story, your podcast as well. So there is so many things that you actually evolved into. And I love how you could actually inspire people to change and evolve with time as well. So just share a little bit about your experience as an educator. What was your experience as an educator?
I think my first big kind of challenge and experience is I decided to pack up 3 bags, buy a one-way ticket, and move to Hawaii when I was 23 years old.
Wow.
Eh, And I always wanted to teach there. But again, being a history teacher, you're not really at the top of the list of the needed teachers. It's usually special education, maybe math, science. So
Mm-hmm.
I already applied, I interviewed. We had recruiters in Philadelphia area. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to wait anymore. I'm just going to go. I'm going to go. And I know I will get a job once I'm there. And I just had that faith. And I did. I got there in 1 month. I got a job. And I was there for 5 years. It was so, so special because I was so young and I didn't really know a lot, and you think you know a lot, right? When you're coming out, I got my degree, I'm a teacher, I know what I'm doing. And then the students actually taught me the real lesson. They taught me that you can't reach children unless you get to know them and unless you really get to know their background and culture. And I was so different, I'm this white woman from Philadelphia and they're Pacific Island children from all over the Pacific. And I had to teach their history. Like part of my lessons were Hawaiian history and Pacific Island studies. And so I got pushed back, and rightfully so. Um, but it allowed me to be humble and to also learn to lean on other people in the community. So I worked with the counselor, I worked with other local teachers that were there for a long time. I, learned how to say, I don't know. I
Mhm.
don't know what to do. I need help. And I'm very fortunate. I had that experience at a young age instead of maybe just taking a safe route and getting into a school in my local area where I taught kids that looked like me and thought that, I knew everything and wasn't
Mm,
challenged. So I very much, I have a deep kind of system of faith, and I've been coming back to that. And I really believe like every journey I've had in education has been part of like kind of my divine path. And so with that, I moved back home to Pennsylvania because there was the Great Recession and economic, times were tough and I couldn't afford to live in Hawaii. It's very expensive. And then the challenge was the public school system was really difficult to get a job in and just difficult with the strategy and like all these things you had to do with certifications. And I was away for so long and I pivoted to private school thinking I would have more freedom and more creativity and more, I don't know, access to doing teaching in a different way. And I did. So that's what I've been in for 11 years is private education. And now I'm ready to pivot again.
I love
And
that. I love that.
yeah, and look at online education and really global education. I'd like to reach as many teachers and students, just like we are today. I've been doing that on my podcast, but I want to do that within my like day-to-day career, because I've been inspired by the work that you're doing, other teachers with podcasts, learning communities, and then the podcast I have. I feel like we really are a global community and we can actually have a global education system.
Definitely, definitely. So what do you think what was missing in the educational system? Just share with us a little bit what was missing that you've seen along the years, like as an educator, what was the issue in the system?
I think as a system, I talk about this a lot too in my podcast and in my book, is that it's kind of more about control and order and not creativity and not honoring every child and meeting them where they are. Doesn't mean that there's not area for improvement and that
Mhm,
every child should get a gold star. Like that's not what
mhm,
I'm talking about, but we have to embrace diversity and embrace neurodiversity and give as many opportunities for children to flourish and see their strengths and hold their strengths with recognizing their areas of growth, but not always feeling like battered down by the system. I think a large portion of students, including myself when I was in school, and I write about that in my book, The Guided Teacher, is that I didn't feel like I knew how to fit in the box.
mhm,
And I
mhm.
didn't feel like my light was honored. I felt like it was dimmed. And I see that in a lot of children, even today in the current school system, even the schools that I've worked at. And it's frustrating because you want to do more, but then being a teacher in the system, you feel like your hands are tied. So I think there's a lot of policies and rules that the higher up, like leaders of the school boards, policymakers are scared to make change because maybe they think it's just too hard to do, but they don't want to lose their power. They don't want to lose their comfy position. It's a lot of politics in
Yeah,
education. And that
yeah,
takes away, I think, the purity of what school should be. And it should be about kids flourishing and being really excited
mm,
to have a curious mind and work with their teachers alongside them as partners
definitely.
to create, a learning environment that's really for all of them.
Definitely. I love that. And this is the thing that we've seen in the world right now. A lot of things has evolved, but the educational system is still the same. Even now, we are entering into this era of artificial intelligence. A technology is evolving, cars is evolving, everything, but the system is still the same. And this is why, as a teacher, you had to step out and really start creating something meaningful, different from the system that could actually empower and make a difference. So let's talk about your podcast and let's talk about what you do, the vision of the podcast, your mission. Share a little bit about the teacher story.
Sure. It stemmed from the pandemic, where I think a lot of people can relate that the pandemic shook us to our core and we started to question our own careers, our own lives, and also the systems that we're in. And I saw a lot of teachers that were just very frustrated and upset with not just how things were during the pandemic, but also before that. And I was in a lot of like online communities talking with teachers about they all were like wanting to leave the system, leave education. And there was this huge movement, especially here in America, of transitioning teachers. There's a hashtag for it in the spring, winter, spring of 2022. And so I felt like I needed my own space and healing through what I've went through in the pandemic. So I wanted to also be holding space for myself and others in this podcast. So I created it to share their stories and to share their ideas and not feel like they're just pushed out and no one's going to listen to them. And it started with it being a place to hold space. And now it's really a podcast about innovation and collaboration and meeting people in and outside of education. So even though, I still keep the same theme of it's a teacher story, but I have had people on that are not the traditional teachers and who are in other roles, but they are advocating and working to build new schools, build new systems, advocate for teachers' rights and students' rights and all of that. So it's kind of growing and developing into a new stage from where it was 2 years ago. And it's exciting because now I'm kind of seeing my role within this education reform movement alongside many different stakeholders in inside and outside of education. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's really helped me learn a lot. It's not just to showcase my guests and their work, but I have evolved in the
Mhm.
process of creating a podcast. I'm sure you can relate to that as well, that it is a
Definitely.
journey for yourself too.
Yes, and I love the fact that you are very into reforming education. We need people like you, we need other stakeholders who have a passion to really change the system to make a difference because I think about the next generation. I think about if we don't do that for them now, it will always be the same. And we need to actually change the mindset of parents, of teachers about the way they should actually deliver their lesson, the way they should train their children to see things differently, especially that now things are changing. We shouldn't have the same kind of mindset that we had 10, 15 years ago. And I think this is what is happening now. Is some Most of the time the kids are changing, they are part of a new era, but the parents, the school system, the teachers, they're still stuck in the old ways of doing things. So talk about your book, because I know that you have a book called The Guided Teacher. So you talked about your podcast, you launched it 2 years ago. Now let's share a bit about the guided teachers. What is a guided teacher about?
So this book came out of kind of the podcast. When I first had the idea to start the podcast, I actually wanted to write a book. But in that time, I guess I wasn't confident enough to put my voice out there in written form, and I didn't see myself as like an author. But I did like talking to people, and I knew I wanted to also, again, hold that space for others to share their story. So within this journey, and learning so much about different ways of doing education, I felt this ping probably winter into spring 2023 to finally write this book. And, I will always say you don't do anything by yourself, you do it in community. So I had many people help me. I had a book coach, Brian Monahan. He's on LinkedIn, wonderful. Met him through Cindy Cohen, who I met through her More Joy community that I'm a part of. And she has her book, More Joy. And so with their help and some other people, I was able to write this story. It's my autobiography in one summer because, being a teacher, we're very busy during the school year. So I wrote this last summer. And it is the story of my life as a child, teenager to adult, personal, but a lot of it is the perspective of being a student. So I talk a lot about my experience as a student and then what led me into teaching and then my various teaching roles. So teaching in public school, I have a whole chapter dedicated to my time in Hawaii because it was so pivotal in my life. And then teaching in private school to teaching in China. I taught in an international summer camp in China. And then this kind of transformation that I've been going through the last 2 years and kind of like my spiritual path that I've been on. And that kind of allowed me to see things in a different way and in a more purposeful way and seeing more connection to community and to looking out at education in a different way. So I end the book with a curriculum that's just a very quick summary of something I might want to go back and dive into and create like more of an actual full-blown curriculum, if not educational program. I have many ideas floating around right now that I want to jump into maybe in the next 2 years called Connected Consciousness. And it's all about holistic education.
Right.
And it's not a curriculum right now that I propose in the book to be a whole school system, but that it can actually work in the current school system because I'm all about baby steps and real change, real transformative change does not happen overnight and it doesn't happen with a fiery revolution. In
Mm,
some ways, it could with political revolutions, but I think in education, I like to call this a graceful revolution
mm,
and doing it in steps and working from the inside out. And so creating maybe a curriculum where this can be in an advisory program that meets once a week. Maybe it's in, a club or in a psychology class or, in another elective, or it could be a whole full-blown program too. It could work with homeschooling, micro schools, online schools, state schools, and private. So I wanted to think where it could touch all spaces because I'm also not someone who wants to just leave the system and just focus on micro schools or alternative education and say, who cares what happens to the public, school system? But that while I'm working on my own career and my own path, I still want to have this message of we need to promote change in all spaces because all children matter and they all deserve to have this type of education where it's about social emotional learning. It's about mental health. It's about the soft skills, learning life skills like financial literacy, interpersonal skills, and really tapping into, again, their strengths and what they can bring to their community. So I would like to see this kind of program in all kinds of spaces and not just say this is something we can do only in private schools, because then really we're not reaching all children. And I think all children deserve to have that in their schools and not be in a place where it's just about standardized testing and just about you only take these subjects and that's it. And you take big tests. And if you fail, then you're a failure and you don't feel like you can equate to anything in life. And I know a lot of children fall through the cracks and drop out of school or have mental health crisis. We see the suicide rate that's been increasing in this time because they do feel that sense of I'm a failure and I'm not connected to community and I don't see my value or my strengths. So, that was kind of the purpose of my book to get to that point, but I really wanted to tell my personal story so that it's relatable maybe to people who can read it and say, I experienced that when I was in school, or I experienced that, as a teacher. I don't think it's a book just for teachers. I think anyone who was a student could relate to maybe much of my story. I'm 41 years old, so if you're in your 30s to 40 range, you could probably relate to many of my pop culture references. I mentioned a lot of songs and I mentioned, things that happened in our country and worldwide, like 9/11, the Great Recession, the pandemic, of course. So it's very timely as well. And yeah, it's something that now that I've completed one book, I have some ideas for a second and third book. So it's been my next path of being an author as well.
I love it. I love it, Jackie. I love how you talk about the holisticness. It's very important to really grow, I would say, from within first and really connected in a higher level. And holisticness is all about, tapping into a different part of us. And when you talk about the guided teacher, I could see that there is something guiding you. I don't know what it is, but maybe relating to your faith, it's really guiding your steps along the way. So you have always done this guided by something greater than you that helped you to actually fulfill what you're doing today. And I'm really passionate about the concept of purpose. And I think you are in your purpose. You are doing the things that you have been born for, that have been created for, because I see so much passion about it. And this is what we and along the way, you are aligned and you're being guided to meet new people that help you in that journey of growth and changing and transformation of yourself. Because I believe that you see different facets of you that you have never seen before. And you would have never thought that today you would be talking on having a podcast, writing your book, like when you started from Pennsylvania to go to Hawaii, you started that journey as a candid, naive teacher. And now look at you sharing with everybody about who you are as a person and your experience. So I think this is amazing. So what is the last thing that you would say? What message of inspiration would you say to teachers or to high school senior leaders or even parents who are listening to us? What would you tell them as a guided teacher?
Thank you so much for that whole kind of reflective part of the guided teacher. And it really is kind of a multifaceted title. Like the more I think about it, it can mean so many different things, especially if someone is approaching this book and they're not coming from a place of having, a sense of faith or a connection to higher power. And by all means, there is a spiritual element to the book because that's my journey, but it is not me pushing that on anyone or thinking the guided teacher is just because it's coming from divine source. That is originally where I got the inspiration from, as I felt guided by my faith and by my connection with God. But as I read back through my book and have had these conversations, the guided teacher and the word guided really also comes from community. And I talk about that at the end of the book, so that we are all guided by each other, by the people in our community, the connections we make that help us along the way, that we don't do anything on our own, that we are always getting help from other people who see our spark and light and see our mission and want to help guide us. So I think that could be a powerful part of, thinking about the title as well, if they are not approaching it in like a higher, you know, order, higher sense kind of way. But my message for parents, students, teachers, anyone in education is that this is not, this change doesn't come from one leader, one person, or just solely teachers or people in education. We all are part of it. We've all been touched by education in some way. We all went through some kind of educational experience, whether that was through a state-run system, private school, even homeschooling. We all have those stories within us, and I think we all can see how we could work together, because I think it happens in, I like to say, a circle instead of top down, where you bring everyone to the table. You bring the parents, you bring the students, you bring the teachers, you bring the administrators, you bring the policymakers. If we could get everyone at the table talking in a circle and really, really elevating not only the teacher voices, but those student voices, getting their input, getting their ideas. What do they want to see? Because they're the ones, we're serving them. They're the ones in it. We've already all gone through this educational experience. And we always are still going through some type of educational experience and the different workplaces and communities that we're in. But the students are the one in it, and we rarely ask them for their input. And, we probably think, oh, they're going to come up with like the whole pie in the sky. I want like an amusement park school, right? And you might get some of those ideas. But really, when you ask students what they want to see in school, they often will share they want more freedom. They want more choice. They want to feel heard. They want to feel a sense of community. They want space to be creative. They want to have more time to work on the projects and the things they value and not feel like they're strapped with all this homework after school and stressed out. And they want to work with us. They want to work with the adults in their community. So I think it's about thinking more about how we all come to the table together and we work in community. And I think just having more empathy and active listening and being open-minded to hearing those ideas. And, like I talked about with my experience in Hawaii, this all takes humility, especially from the adults. We got to kind of take off our adult hat and say, I don't know everything. And I do want to listen to the younger people because they have really innovative ideas. And we are living in an exponential age of change that's happening rapidly. And we really do need to utilize those young people's voices, I think, when we're sharing these ideas.
Yeah, I love this. I love how you are really sharing about the motives. It's important that adults really understand why they are in education. And I think sometimes we tend to forget the reason why we are doing this. We're doing this for them. We're doing this for the next generation. So I like your idea of bringing everybody on the table and especially listening to the voice of the students because they are the one that needs a change in education. They are the one who can actually help us see things differently. And I love as well the concept of leadership. Two things in my life is purpose, is leadership, and it's all part of leadership. A leader listens, a leader empowers, a leader inspires. A leader really do things out of humility. And I really talk about as well the concept of servant leadership. I think that we need to have more leaders who are servants to the people that are in their community to help them growing and developing themselves into leaders themselves. So I thank you so much, Jackie, for being part of this podcast. I thank you for taking the time. And definitely, I encourage anyone who wants to join, to reach out to Jackie, to reach her out to her Instagram. So share your Instagram with people, your links, if you have any links to the audience. Do you have any links, please?
Yeah, and you can share anything in the show notes too. My Instagram is jackie.c.scully because there's a lot of Jackie Scullys out there, so I use my middle initial.
Wow.
And I'm pretty active on there. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So you could just find Jackie Scully, MED. I have a website called jackie.c.scully.com. And you can find the teacher's story on like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Amazon, and YouTube. And you can find the teacher's story, the book, on Amazon on most marketplaces, global marketplaces. And so, yes, please reach out anytime you want to connect. Anybody who wants to be featured on the teacher's story. Again, you don't have to be a traditional teacher, but if you are in the education system or working alongside others in the education system, especially if you're doing something really innovative and different, that's kind of where the podcast is going, because I want to get from the place of we're just talking about it. Now let's actually see the places that are doing it. And so that can be inspiring to actually make that change too.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and make sure you connect with us on Instagram at The Case for Success. Check also my Linktree and become an affiliate of the Success Guide for Teens Academy, a program that will empower your school community as a parent, teacher, and high school senior leader. Do not hesitate to reach out, comment, and share. Until then, see you in the next episodes.